Welcome to the Homeward Bound podcast by the Mortgage Guys, your ultimate guide to navigating home buying and mortgage lending. Whether you're searching for your first home or settling into your forever home, we're here to make the journey simple, clear, and exciting, helping you secure your dreams one home at a time.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Mortgage Guys, where we talk about everything that is home finance related and hopefully something even more interesting than that. But glad you're here with us again today. We're Kyle Torgerson and myself with Premier Mortgage Resources here to talk to you about some stuff. And Kyle's going to take a quick moment again, as he always does so perfectly and so eloquently, and he's going to talk about our sponsor for today's episode.
Is there anything more exciting than home financing? Especially today. But, today's episode is lovingly brought to you by HA Wealth Advisors. Weston Adams and David Harris and their expert team are here to grow, protect, and plan your financial future. Visit hawealthadvisors.com to learn more. Love these guys. They're a pillar in our community. They do a fantastic job for those that they work with.
They seem
to
be
know their stuff.
They seem to be some young go-getters, real motivated.
They know what they're doing. It's been fun. I've been working with Weston Adams in particular myself, and sharp guy.
Yeah.
Great golfer.
He's
I wish I was a good golfer.
He's a great golfer. He's good in my book.
Well,
something I want to be.
Aside from his many awesome traits, he is a good golfer as well. But
anyway,
good people.
I'm glad you guys have such a good friendship and grateful for him to be a sponsor on today's episode. So obviously we've had a pretty active rate market over the last couple weeks.
Man, have we? I mean, it seems like every morning I wake up and wonder what happened overnight.
Mm-hmm.
And between all the bombs dropping and I don't know,
tariffs, bombs.
I mean, there's a whole bunch of strikes and things going on. I mean, it's just everywhere you look. I mean, there's something interesting to read. That's for sure.
Yeah, there is, and it's nice because I think we get in these strides. Obviously, it ebbs and it flows, and you have peaks and valleys. But I think we're right now sitting in a really good one. The last couple of weeks have been nice for rates. We've had an improvement of sorts, and with that, it starts bringing out a little bit of a different topic for us, don't you think?
Yeah, everybody seems to be asking, when's the Fed going to drop the rate? When are mortgage rates going to drop? And we're seeing a lot of indication that the Fed's going to drop their rates, which will have a lot of bearing on our mortgage rates.
Yeah.
We've talked about that in previous episodes, but at the same time, it feels good.
Mm-hmm.
Lesser rates around the table are always good, but a common question that comes up, because let's face it, Dave, we've had higher interest rates for 2.5 going into 3 years now.
Yeah.
They really started edging up this time in 22.
Yeah.
June of 22, they started really cranking up.
Especially when we, relatively speaking, right? Because we're sitting in the mid sixes right now is a safe thing to say. And when we look at the mid sixes, that's not awful on the big long scale. We talked about this in previous episodes, but we were really, really spoiled in 21, 22?
Yeah, 20, 21, 22.
Yeah, I mean, to see rates that we got down, and when the first number was a 2, that was just, I'm sorry to use the term stupid, but that was stupid.
I was talking to a client yesterday that's trying to buy a home here, and they're relocating to Cedar. And he said, what's rates? I have a VA loan. It should be pretty sexy. I said, oh, it is. It's a lot more than, conventional rate for sure. And I quoted him, about 6.25, which I thought was pretty amazing. And he said, oh, holy cow. That's, I bought my last home in 2021. I said, well, that would be a different scenario. He said he was in the 2s with his VA at the time. And as much as I'd love for him to be back in the 2s, we're not there. I don't know if we'll ever get there again, but we're edging down. I mean, we're edging in the right direction.
But you made a good point, Kyle. You said, we've had about 2.5 years now of these rates as we've come out of that historic low. And there's been buyers through these last 2.5 years. We're still doing loans where people are still buying homes, and people have been buying homes, in spite of the rates being a little bit higher. So what does that really mean for us now as we start to see this turn in interest rates, where at one point they got up near the 8% figure, a little bit more, whatever it was for the program. But now here we are in the mid 6s, and looks like we're headed for hopefully the 5s relatively soon. And so what does that spell for us?
Well, you're right. We're on that other end of that parabolic curve,
Mm-hmm.
where we kind of tabled off for a while, and we're starting to see that little bit of a slide. What that means for us, what it means for our clients is that hopefully they could take advantage of some lower interest rates and replace their existing mortgage with a new mortgage or refinance their loan.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what we want to talk about today is, when does it make sense to refi? Is a refi a good idea? What does it mean to refi?
Yeah. And that's a common question people get, especially over the last about last year or two, as they've got these mortgages, these new homes they've purchased with that higher interest rate, is they know that at one point I can refinance. And, I think basically, just to take a quick second for those of the listeners out there, somebody that's watching this that maybe hasn't had a mortgage yet in the past, refinance is just basically where you take your current loan and people have probably done it on cars before, where you refinance it. You set up a new loan, cast a new loan with a new payment based on a new interest rate and a new principal balance. Sometimes they want to bring some cash in to reduce that principal. Sometimes they want to roll those fees in because there's typically a cost with every refinance. So it's basically a way of capturing a different current market rate, especially if it's lower than the previous one that you had when you got your mortgage put in place. So.
Yeah. A common question we get, especially with first-time home buyers that have never refinanced a home, is, okay, rates are dropped. Can you just drop my interest rate?
Yeah.
No, I wish we could. It'd be really simple. Just say, okay, now we're here. But it's not that simple. You've signed a promissory note.
Yeah.
You've agreed to the terms of your rate and your loan and your repayment. And so a refinance is quite simply a replacement note. You got to go through the process of getting a new loan to pay off that existing first mortgage that you've had, and it can be quite a simple process, especially those who have helped in the past. And I always tell my clients at the closing table, especially over the last two or three years, is, hey, rates are going to fall. When they do, I've got your information. We can simply just go through and replace that loan as simply as possible. And there's a lot of times where we don't even need a new appraisal.
Yeah,
it's kind of fun.
That is nice, especially when they have a significant amount of equity maybe, or the market's been real stable or rising. Sometimes we can get away without appraisals. That does save them a lot on cost. But, typically 9 times out of 10, it seems like when somebody wants to do a refinance, it's typically driven by just wanting a lower interest rate, maybe wanting to get a lower payment. But in some cases, and let's just stay on that topic for a minute, the myths, rules of thumb, whatever we want to call it, we've in the past over my career, I've heard everything from the $100 saving benchmark to the 1% in rate benchmark to, when does it make sense for somebody? Let's discuss that for a minute here. Let me get your opinion on when would it make sense for one of your clients to come back to you or you to reach out to them, because we keep a database going and want to help people when we think it's time. When does it, in your opinion, when does it make sense for somebody, one of your clients, to refinance?
You mentioned the 1% rule. I don't know whether to call it a myth or a rule, but it basically is referring to the fact that, that cost of refinancing and reducing that payment outweighs the cost of refinancing it. And that is something that we certainly work through with our clients to see if that cash flow instantly improves in their life because they reduce that payment. But, that savings in their payment, how long does that take to break even on the cost it was to refinance?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's 1%. Sometimes it's only 0.5%. You roll all the fees of your refinance into your mortgage. And so there is no cost required upfront right there at the table.
Yeah.
It's absorbed. And so ultimately, we want to make sure our clients are making good financial decisions so that the cost isn't being outweighed by the benefit. It's got to be the reverse. But that's the first rule I look at, is to see if, the improvement in their rate is significant enough to merit a refinance.
Yeah.
Some people, it's an emotional thing. They don't like the fact that they're at 7%. They'd prefer to be at 6.5%. It just feels better, looks better on their statement if they're reading it. That's nice. But at the same time, it's got to make sense.
Yeah, it does. And I think sometimes that interest rate on that statement, or that they know they have, I think it's sometimes, we talked about it before, it's like, you go to a social setting or a party, it's a bragging right to say you have the, it used to be maybe it's the fastest car or this or that, but I got the lowest rate. And that's
you always get that person that tops you like, I'm still at 3%.
Yeah,
like, okay,
they do.
Guy, go over there.
They talk about it like it's a huge achievement. Okay, you had good timing in the market.
Good timing,
That's what it was.
That's all you got.
But you're right. You bring up a good point, because it does, every time we do a refinance, sometimes we can save on that appraisal, like you said, and that's not always necessary. And then sometimes, but typically what they can count on is that we will have title fees.
Yeah.
They will have to, title company's going to have some costs to be able to write a new policy there. And then in addition to that, we've got some fees that are on the loan side, and depending on if they're going to, buy points to buy the rate down or whatever, there is an overall cost every time they refinance. And like you said, you roll it into the loan. So, and what I've always looked at as a rule of thumb is we got to look at how many months it's going to take to recoup that savings, or recoup that investment, I should say. So they're going to save, let's say they save $200 a month on their payment with this refinance. And if the cost to do it costs, I'm going to use simple mathematics, let's say it's $5,000 to do it. They've got to look at that and back into it, $5,000 divided by $200 a month, it's going to tell you how many months it's going to take you to recoup. So they need to say, am I going to live in this house?
Yeah.
Are my plans to stay in this house long enough to be able to find that, recoup those savings?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, if people are wanting to refinance, but they don't plan on being in their home for another 2 years, it may not be worth it, period.
It wouldn't be.
You'll be kind of just flushing that cash away, increasing your loan, wiping away equity, however you want to look at it, but it wouldn't be worth it. Typically what we've seen, especially if it's really going to be paying itself off soon, is between 3 and 5 years.
Yeah.
If you can recoup your costs and be money ahead after 3 to 5 years, and you plan, of course, in living in that home that long, absolutely, that makes perfect sense to refinance. It's time to do it.
Yeah. And I remember over the years we've been doing this long enough that we've seen these rates start to trend down, where you've actually done a refinance. Maybe it's gone down 1 or 2% or 1.5%, and you do a refinance for them, and then all of a sudden the rate goes down even further. In another 2 years or 1 year after that, it goes down again. And I remember I have one client that's a friend of mine from back home in Arizona, and I refinanced him, I think it was 4 times during a drop in interest rate.
And he'd just catch every step on the way down.
He just did. He kept going. He goes, look, if I can roll all my costs into this loan, and if I can continually just sit there and drop my payment, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And in his mind, and he was a CPA. He was actually a very smart person when it came to dollars and cents. So that was his theory. Now, it's going to be different for everybody. I think, obviously, people have a different reason, a different why for everything they do in life. And I think, but the monthly savings is a pretty significant part of it. I think there's an overall bigger picture. And, but anyway, as far as, sometimes is it kind of frustrating when you talk to a client that they should probably refinance, but maybe they don't see it, they don't believe it, they don't grasp it? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I've got a couple of scenarios right now, in fact, where I'm trying to help clients make some good financial decisions. One in particular bought a second home on the mountain, and this was it was 2 years ago. It was 2023. And second home rates had changed. They weren't as good as first home rates anymore. And at that time, I mean, the second home rate, she had a good amount of cash in. It was still 8.6.
Wow.
And reached out to her, and I said, hey, saving 1% is usually a good rule of thumb. But what if we saved you 2%?
Mm-hmm.
And she's thinking about it. And I think they'll get to the point where they pull the trigger. I shouldn't say she, is they. Mm-hmm. They'll pull the trigger and make it work. But at the same time, there's some times where it's uber obvious that this is a massive cost savings. In calculating it, I think it should save them almost $800 a month.
Wow, which
is pretty significant pay raise.
That's a lot.
Yeah,
that's a lot on the monthly budget for almost any household. $800
is significant. Yeah,
that's a big one. Okay, and then also, we talked before about, in addition to these just normal refinances where you're going to save, the interest rate is going to drive the savings. I mean, where would somebody look at maybe something bigger picture, maybe something that most of these people don't really realize they can do with the refinance? And I'm kind of hitting the cash out. Are you seeing much of that lately?
It's conversation right now. Mm-hmm. A lot of people are realizing that they've got some pretty good low balances on their mortgages at times, but at the same time, their equity position is pretty strong.
Yeah.
And so the cash out refinance really comes into effect when you've got that perfect storm. Mm-hmm. It's an awesome situation. Replacing a mortgage, perhaps it's a little bit lower rate, but they've got these projects they want to do. And instead of getting like a home equity line of credit where those are tied to prime, and prime right now is it's a lot more than mortgage rates. It makes sense at times to pull some cash out of your equity, despite it being a slightly higher rate than just a regular refinance. A regular refinance versus a cash out refinance, you're maybe going to have an interest rate that's an eighth, sometimes an eighth higher, depending on your equity position. But to have that cash available to do massive projects, renovations around your home, it can certainly be worth it.
Yeah, and we've seen people do it when they want to acquire something else. Maybe they want to buy a second property, maybe they want to get into an investment property, and they really need to tap into that to be able to get that down payment to buy that thing. And this is the perfect way of doing it.
It's a great vehicle to do it.
How about debt? I know a lot of people, especially right now, we hear on the news that, consumer debt is kind of, I guess, at an all-time high or pretty close to it. So that means a lot of people out there that we're dealing with on a daily basis, we pull the credit reports and we look at it, and they have a balance. Yeah. They have a lot of balances. And sometimes as rates on the mortgages can start to go in a downward trend like this, and if they have enough equity, that's a big savings when you start not looking only at what it would save on just the mortgage refinance, but then you start clearing out all those other payments. And that can be huge, right?
It can. In fact, I've got a client right now. We're doing a refinance, and it just happened that we're gonna drop all of her debt into this bucket, and she's got plenty of equity, and just that by itself, we're going to save her over $400 a month in her global cash flow, because of encapsulating and refinancing all her debt. And some might argue that you're taking a car loan and now you're throwing into a 30-year mortgage. Yeah, and I get that. And sometimes it makes sense not to do that. But if money is super tight and you need that improvement, it can certainly be worth it to improve your cash flow. Absolutely. Make things so that you're not so bound up. Because inflation's real, right? Yeah. Our grocery bills keep getting bigger, and if we can eliminate something to give us a little more breathing room, it can certainly help.
I think a key that you just said right there. It's really about cash flow. Most families right now, it's about, they want to start to develop some wealth, but they really need to get to where they're not just living paycheck to paycheck. And sometimes that's going to be giving them a way of having some excess beyond paying the bills. Yeah. And this is a great way to do it when you can consolidate all those debts. I remember some people that I've talked to before that have rolled in some vehicle loans, especially some credit card bills that are getting out of hand, because it's really hard to chip away on those credit cards sometimes. And if you don't have a windfall that you see happening in your life, and you got equity in the house, I've had some people where I've done these big cash out refinances for that have cleared everything out, and it's like you were talking about. I remember saving people over $1,000, $2,000 a month in overall payments. When you look at all the payments they were paying before, mortgage plus credit cards plus automobile, if they can wipe it all out, if they have enough equity, do a refinance, it's significant. Yeah. It's a big deal.
One thing, Dave, that we probably ought to throw in here, aside from just simply saving money on an interest rate, is that we help a lot of people with different programs put as minimal down as possible, even up to 100% financing, so zero down. And it's a lot of times when you do that, there's mortgage insurances involved. Let's face it, if you don't put down 20%,
you're going to pay it.
You're going to pay it. Mm-hmm. Who has 20% to come down? That's a tough figure to come up with.
Especially sales prices being a little higher the last few years.
Yep. And so a major reason for people to have a desire to refinance, aside from saving money instantly on an interest rate, is to drop that mortgage insurance. Yeah. If we can show, sometimes with a new appraisal, sometimes without, that there is a 20% equity position that these clients have, we can instantly drop that mortgage insurance. Which how much is that per month sometimes?
That's a good point, because I have a client today that I was just working with, and he's going to be doing an FHA loan, and FHA typically has, it was historically one of the higher mortgage insurance factors in the business, 0.85, but now it's only 0.55. Thank goodness they've come down to make it a little more competitive. But still, it's a $200 a month part of his payment is going to be $200 a month to mortgage insurance. And he said, okay, I'm coming in basically, he's going to have, 5% down right now. But he said, when I fall into money, meaning if I save up some money, or maybe he gets an inheritance, or whatever it could be, I fall into some money and rates go down. He said, what can we do at that point? And that's when I talked to them about a refinance, exactly what you just mentioned. I said, you can refinance at that time, get a new appraisal, hopefully values go up a little bit. Maybe you throw a little bit of cash at it and it makes sense.
Yep.
Because you can drop that mortgage insurance. And this is a home he wants to live in for a long time. So anyway, yeah, that's just that in itself. Let's say the interest rate saves them $100 a month in interest savings. And then if they can shake $200 a month in MI, now you're talking $300 a month. I mean, what could a family or a young couple do with $300 extra a month?
That's almost a $4,000 a year pay increase.
It's a bunch of money.
That's a pile of cash. I mean, they can pay off debts.
Yeah.
They could, go get some groceries.
Yeah.
I mean, there's all sorts of things.
And if you look at it, you get 300 or so a month. That's, like you say, almost 4,000 on the net side.
On the net side.
So you talk about before taxes are taken out, it's probably almost $5,000 a year is
good point.
A raise. So that a great point on mortgage insurance. I'm glad we're able to cover that.
Yep. It can be really, it's a sanity saver. It really can. One of the questions that keeps coming up with loans in general, but especially with refinances, is because you're replacing the loan, and kind of circling back a little bit, the cost of refinance, replacing a loan. A lot of people think that it can be too expensive and too cumbersome. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
You know what? I think it comes back to what we talked about, how long you're going to live in that house, and when will you recoup those savings. If you're going to recoup it by absolutely all means, it does make sense. Yeah. I mean, if it's going to be something, it's like you said it quickly here. You said, if they're only going to live in the house for a year and a half, should they go through this process just for the sake of lowering an interest rate? And I think that's where we as mortgage professionals, we really need to do our duty here. We really need to have their best interest at heart. I mean, obviously you and I are paid on closing loans. That's what it is. That's where our commissions come from, as if somebody closes a loan. But never should we, and never can we, really lead somebody down a path that just doesn't make financial sense.
Right.
And we use that term before, give them enough rope to hang themselves. I don't want to do that. I don't want anything. I don't want knowing that they're going to be getting out of this home within a year and putting them in this refinance, and never just for the sake of a closing. So I think it's up to us to really coach them and tell them if there's a red light, don't do it.
Excellent. I like that a lot.
Coach them on that.
I like that a lot. A lot of questions we get about refinancing too is this something really quick? Is this something that is going to take forever? I'd pin it right in the middle of that. Sometimes it's really quick though. I mean, we've had refinances where, we've come in and we were able to instantly verify their income, instantly able to see if they need an appraisal or not. And we've been able to close them in, 10 days.
Yeah.
Super fast.
Especially when you take that appraisal out of the situation, because that's kind of the time eater, right? You got to get a third-party appraiser to come out, schedule it, go out. They have to do the review, submit it, and that appraisal has to be reviewed. If you take that out of the equation, the closings can happen really, really fast. And I think technology, we've been doing this long enough. And I remember back to the days where everything was faxed. We actually had a fax machine in the office where we faxed everything to the underwriter.
You're dating yourself, Dave.
I know, and it's really, really old. I'm going back into the late 90s, early 2000s. Yeah, early 2000s. And we, anyway, back in those days, things took longer. They just did. I mean, I remember when a standard closing was 45 to 60 days on a mortgage back 25 years ago. And now, I mean, even on refinance or purchase, the only thing about a refinance, and I'll talk about this, that if it's a primary residence we're refinancing, I think people need to understand that there's going to be a 3-day right of rescission.
Good point. That's
on
good to
that.
bring up.
And basically what that means is from the moment they sign the documents at the title company at the end, because it's their primary residence, our federal government has a law that basically gives them the right to review things and reconsider for 3 days. Mm-hmm. So they sign those documents and you have 3 business days to change your mind and say, you know what, never mind. I was, out of my mind. I don't want to do this. They can cancel. It's that right to cancel. So that adds to a refinance an extra 3 days beyond a purchase.
Yeah, which I'm glad they do that. They've had so many days to review it with us already, and now they get 3 more days, which is really good. But I've had so many experiences where people are doing a cash out refinance, and they're signing, and they say, "Okay, where's my check?"
Yeah,
like we're going to give that check to you the end of the week. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
I don't have to wait till the end of the week to make this work. And so that rescission is really important to bring up. And it's the only thing that's different with a refinance than any other loan would be that rescission.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, what can our clients think about? And I think we mentioned this in some purchase scenarios. And there's certain things that our borrowers can do to help them get the best possible situation or circumstance with their refinance. What can they do for themselves to help to maybe get the best rate, the best terms, the best whatever? What advice or what things can you think of that they should be thinking of?
The first one that comes to mind is do not miss a mortgage payment in that preceding 12 months. That can be a really difficult hump to get over if you've missed or been late on a mortgage payment in the preceding 12 months. It might be impossible to refinance unless you let that rolling 12 months expire. So make your payments. Definitely make your payments on time. The other thing is I would definitely you definitely as a consumer should know your financial situation. Be aware of the debts you have. Be really monitoring your budget to see if it merits a refinance or if you can just keep attacking those smaller debts, those credit cards, those car loans, because rolling those debts into a mortgage, it spans that debt out for 30 years. And we'll do our best to help a consumer understand that too when we sit down with them. But having the financial savvy of just simply saying, no, I can handle these debts outside of a refinance, or at the same time on the reverse is I need to refinance these because I'm in some financial peril. Yeah. And if nothing changes, I'm going to be in trouble. So
no, that's a great point, especially that first point you mentioned right there with, it goes along with credit, right? So we talked about how interest rates are really the best interest rate you can get is if you have the best credit out there.
Yeah.
And if they miss a mortgage payment, there's certain things that attack someone's credit score, right? One of the biggest you just mentioned is a late payment, especially a fresh, recent late payment, like you say, within 12 months. And then in addition to that is carrying high credit card balances versus the limit. So you have a $10,000 credit card limit, and if you're sitting there at $9,500, $9,800, you got it maxed out, and you have 3 of those.
Yeah,
it might still make sense to do a cash out refinance because you need to get out from under that bondage of that debt, and even if those high balances on your credit cards have your credit scores down from 780 down to 680. You know what? It might make financial sense. And that's where we'll come in and do a breakdown and really show them all that. But I think exactly. Keep your credit score in good shape. And that's one of the smartest things they can do. And then also, I think since they're refinancing their house, house values are really driven by square footage. But if your house looks like a garbage can, especially if that appraiser is going to come out there, it's not going to set the right precedence with that appraiser. If you're not keeping up on the house and you're just letting things fall off, whatever it is, it's going to be noted, and that can impact your appraised value. And obviously, you want your appraised value and the amount you're refinancing, the bigger gap you can have between those two, the better. So that's
a good point. I hadn't even considered or thought about what a consumer can do to make their home look more appealing to an appraiser.
Yeah.
But that is important. If the appraiser's coming by, maybe tidy up.
Yeah.
Make sure that house is looking good. Make sure there's no safety issues. If you're missing some railings or something like that, they're going to call that kind of stuff out.
Yeah.
And it won't necessarily drop the value, but it might mean that the appraiser needs to go back out to your home and say, hey, is that railing back on?
Mm-hmm.
And so that can be a little expensive if you or cost a little more if you have to get the appraiser back out there to verify things. But yeah, that's a good point.
Well, and one of the things people say is it's just it's super expensive, which we touched on, but they also think that it's going to restart their clock all over. Let's say they have a 30-year mortgage. Let's say you put somebody in a 30-year mortgage 2 years ago, and now they're like, okay, rates are down, I want to do this. Or maybe it was, let me use a little bit of different illustration. Maybe 10 years ago they did one, and now they want to refinance, and they've said to you, if I do this refinance, now I got to start a brand new 30-year over.
They certainly could.
Yeah, and that's an option.
They certainly could. That would reduce their payment pretty well at that time too. But yeah, that question does come up, and is a little bit disheartening to go backwards, right?
Yeah.
You never want to just start over just to start over, because that's expensive. Over time, that's interest you're paying. But time is expensive. 10 years is a long time.
It is.
But no, we have the freedom to do a lot of different things. I mean, mortgages come in packages of a 30-year, but they also come in a 20 to 25, 15, and a 10. And so we can pretty well tailor a refinance to match your situation. Not to mention that as you go down in term, your rate can improve. Going from a 30 to a 15-year, for example, is an improvement in your rate.
Yeah, and it's based on how the market is, obviously, but typically, almost generally speaking, it's almost always, unless there's an inverted yield curve, where we're going to have the 15-year is better than the 20, and the 20 is better than the 30, and the 10 is even better than them all. So good point. If you have somebody that's sitting in one that has been around for a long time, and let's say they didn't refinance in the last 2 or 3 refi waves, maybe their head was under a rock, or they were in a long winter slumber. But if they didn't refinance back when they should have, and now if they can refinance and get into a shorter term and go into 15-year or 10-year and drop enough significantly in the interest rate, the payment might not be that different. And they've had some cases where people have only been in their mortgage for 5 years, and then they refinance and go straight into a 15. So they're basically saving themselves 5 years, if they go to a 15-year, 10 years. And then they actually have a similar payment, and that just shortens that horizon. Now, that's for the person, obviously. We have to talk again about what we mentioned a minute ago. What is your horizon? Are you going to live in this home? Is this your forever home, or is it not? I think that's the biggest question that our listeners really need to think about. Is this my forever home? And if it is, because there are still some people out there that do keep them a long, long time, then it's really about, the overall savings.
Yeah. Ultimately, I think there's a lot of different reasons people would refinance. It makes sense a lot of the time. If it doesn't make sense, sometimes we'll suggest things to help people understand when it might be a good time to refinance. But definitely leading into a reduced rate environment, like I believe we are. These are questions that people are going to have. We've felt it very important to us in our podcast to disseminate that information, to make sure that people understand that, it's going to make sense for you. But before you go talk to a lender, make sure it's going to fit your needs initially. And if you're not sure, definitely call us.
Yeah.
We'd love to be able to talk to you about that. We'll give you the best answer we possibly can.
And I think as a wrap up on this, let's discuss one last thing. I mean, as we've seen through the years, through these refinance times, when things get into a hot refi market, it's like they come out of the woodworks, right?
Yeah.
Those warehouse lenders, those internet lenders, whatever they are, they're going to start advertising like crazy. So I think we should probably throw some caution out there to anybody listening. It's not always about the interest rate, especially the interest rate that you see or you receive in an email, a phone call, or whatever it might be, because there's some fine print. Obviously, we talked about you can buy down the interest rate with discount points, and sometimes they don't even categorize as a discount point. They might make excessive fees on the other side of the statement, and I think it's best to really have a lender that you trust, someone that is not out there to soak you, just to get you into a low interest rate and then get you, overcharge on fees. And I think there's just too much of that where people, unfortunately, one point in our industry, they got rid of predatory lending for that same reason. And I think this falls into it. So really, I advise someone to go to somebody that they trust.
Yeah.
Like what you mentioned.
Yep, I agree. The online lending, it's online.
Yeah, they're not. You don't have to see them at the movie theater or the restaurant, right?
That's right.
That
That's
loan
right.
officer.
But anyway, thanks, Dave. I appreciate you always putting together and introducing your topics and making sure that these are always working the way they're supposed to. This is fun.
It is, and it's awesome. Obviously, doing it. Kyle and myself both, but Kyle has a ton of experience, and it's just he has such a wealth of knowledge, and I appreciate you being able to share that all the time with your different stories, and you're always applicable, and I think with the way you presented it resonates well with people, and I think it's something that people can pick up on. So, but anyway, thanks again. Thanks, Kyle, and if anybody has any questions, please reach out. We're here for you. Thank you.